Welcome to Dolphins Today by Chat Sports, and we headlined today's show with this piece of Dolphins news coming out this morning. Adam Schefter had the initial report that the Dolphins are actually releasing veteran defensive tackle and defensive lineman Teair Tart. We'll talk about that and what it means for this Dolphins defense and how as it progresses throughout training camp. But I will say this right off the bat when it comes to Teair Tart. I am not surprised that Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel decided to move on from the veteran defensive lineman. Tart has a ton of upside and a ton of talent. He's displayed that when he was a Tennessee Titan because he had a good year 2 seasons ago. Then he went to the Texans and it didn't really work out there. But the Dolphins bet on the talent when they signed Tart to a 1-year deal earlier in the offseason during free agency. But he showed up to OTAs and minicamp in June and July. I don't know if he was injured or out of shape, but it was widely reported that he did not look like he was in shape. Maybe it was an injury, but maybe not. And it just never looked like he got his feet under him in Miami and really performed to the expectations this coaching staff had for the veteran defensive lineman. And with other guys playing so well, and how good we saw them play against the Falcons on Friday night in the first preseason game, it does not surprise me that they moved on from Teair Tart and are starting to go forward with some of these other players on the roster. But let me know, and I'm curious, and I want to see everyone give me your 1 words down below for the Teair Tart cut. When you first got that notification, or if you're just learning for the first time today, which if you are, make sure you follow me on Twitter because I would have kept you updated. But let me know your 1 word to seeing Teair Tart be released. And that's kind of what I want to go here. He just never panned out. He never flashed. Tart has the talent, but he just doesn't work hard 100% of the time. And I hate calling someone out for their work ethic, but it's kind of been the story for him in his career a little bit, where he has the ability to just eat blocks on the interior and free up linebackers to fill gaps in the run game. But he just has not been able to just stack seasons, games, practices to keep a long, good streak of football going. And when that is the case and you're not giving it your 100% all and you're not coming into mandatory minicamp and OTAs in shape and you're having to get back into shape during that time, you're just going to get passed up by others on the roster. And I think that's what happened here, because when you think about what the Dolphins do have on their defensive line depth chart, when you just look at the interior and don't look in like a Zach Sealer or Calais Campbell, like these defensive lineman depth pieces are actually performing extremely well. Benito Jones, who's missed a couple practices here as of late, has been really, really solid in the beginning of the offseason and in the beginning of training camp. Deshaun Hand has been making plays left and right in the game against the Falcons, but also in practice. Brandon played extremely well on Friday. Isaiah Mack had a couple good plays, and we saw the former Dallas Cowboy, Neville Gallimore, really showcase his athleticism on the interior defensive line during that first preseason game in Atlanta. So to me, I think the writing was just on the wall here that Teair Tart wasn't going to make this roster. And either they did him a solid to release him a little bit early and say, hey, maybe you can try to latch on with other players or a different team during the training camp and preseason. But the Dolphins just ran out of room. They like some of those other guys, and I don't blame them because I like what I've really seen out of this defensive line on the interior through the first little bit here of training camp. So it is what it is. Teair Tart just not able to make this roster, ran out of room for the Miami Dolphins, and maybe they just look in a different direction now and really just have trust on some of the guys that are currently already on this roster. We also do have some other injury news that we have to get to here in terms of the Dolphins, and we're really going to be talking about Ethan Bonner here. And it's okay, Goldman, we could just go to a normal L3 at the bottom here. Don't worry about that. But Ethan Bonner has missed the last 2 practices for the Miami Dolphins, and it was recently reported by Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald that it ended up being a concussion, and that's the reason why he is being held out. Not ideal for Bonner, and it really stinks that he suffered a concussion, which I don't really remember anything crazy happening in that game on Friday against the Falcons, but evidently concussion-like symptoms popped up the following week, and it's the reason why he's missed the Monday practice and Tuesday practice. But he is hoping, and this is the report, that he is going to be cleared by Thursday, so he is going to be able to play on Saturday in the Dolphins' second preseason game. Bonner's had an excellent camp for the Fins and is looking to push for a roster spot. Another corner that we have to talk about, Cam Smith, the second-year guy from South Carolina who was a second-round pick in 2023. He's back at practice. He basically has not been here for the past 2 weeks, missed the first preseason game, and he's obviously been someone that we've talked about a lot on the channel. Me personally, Jake Rietma, Tom Downey over the past year or so, ever since he got selected by the Fins, just due to the fact that they took him so high as a second-round pick, but he did not play in his rookie season under Vic Fangio, and he needs reps, man. And it's important that he is going to have to stay healthy for the rest of preseason training camp. Because if he wants to contend for a roster spot, and I do believe he's kind of a lock, and maybe contend was the wrong word to use there, but if he wants to have a role on this Dolphins defense this season, he needs to prove that he is worthy of being that second-round pick he was last season, because he just hasn't been able to show that so far, and he hasn't been able to be on the field for practice or the preseason so far. But Cam Smith being back, hopefully he could stay healthy and prove why he was a second-round pick in 2023. Some other injuries that we have to talk about on today's show as well. Mohamed Kamara, Aaron Brewer, Benito Jones, Tanner Conner, Jody Fortosn Jr., Jeff Wilson Jr., Jaylen Waddle, and Anthony Schwartz is all players that did not participate in practice today. They were not seen at all. Kamara's missed 4 straight. Aaron Brewer, the starting center for the Miami Dolphins, who is projected to miss a couple weeks, according to Barry Jackson. We saw Fortosn Jr. and Conner leave the first preseason game for the Dolphins. Conner, we don't know his status in terms of when he's coming back. It was reported that Fortosn Jr. had just a stinger, so maybe he's being held out of practice for precautionary reasons. Wilson is also a little bit interesting that he didn't show up. Waddle's still working his way back after missing about a week of practices due to that minor injury, according to Mike McDaniel. But make sure you are subscribed to the channel, because this is why, right? We're going to cover you on everything happening surrounding the Dolphins. Highlights, rumors, injury news, roster moves, as we did with Teair Tart. Hit that sub button. We're on the road to 58K subs, and I'd like to get there before this week ends. We will get a boost on Saturday when we have our watch party with the second preseason game against the Commanders. So make sure you subscribe and join us for that as well. All right, let's talk about Odell Beckham Jr. now, because Tua Tagovailoa, after practice, had some media availability, and they asked him about OBJ. Here's Barry Jackson with the initial note, and the main takeaway I had from Tua's press conference. Tua said that he's thrown with OBJ, but only stationary. OBJ still on the PUP list, but allegedly is moving well. Tua said once he's able to start running and catching balls, it's a whole nother thing. That's the one of the tougher parts for the new wide receivers in this offense. And that's kind of where I want to take this conversation. And I said that when OBJ was placed on the PUP list, I wasn't concerned. I thought it was a minor injury, and he would be back after a week or so, and he would be ready for week 1 of the NFL season. But last week, when some more news and notes about OBJ being week to week from head coach Mike McDaniel came out, then I'm kind of out on that idea. And I think Odell Beckham Jr. is actually going to be missing the first week of the NFL season. Because the Dolphins offense is so complex and different from other ones where there's so much motion, you really have to be on time with your timing between quarterback and wide receiver. I just don't think there's going to be enough time for OBJ and Tua to build that rapport up, and I think Odell Beckham Jr. is going to ultimately miss the first game against the Jaguars on September 8th, which is a little bit disappointing. Another thing coming out of Tua Tagovailoa's availability today is that he is pledging for or advocating for starters to be playing in this preseason game on Saturday. Tagovailoa said that he hopes to play against the Commanders this Saturday, but him team leaders will talk with head coach McDaniel on the game plan this week. I think this is a smart idea, whether it's in the third preseason game, whether it's in the second preseason game. I don't care which one it is, but the healthy guys on this roster need live reps. And I get the concern with playing them in the preseason because it's not necessary and you don't want to risk injury there. But I also think it's irresponsible to go into your first meaningful football game and all of your starters have played no real contact football, because you don't really play contact football in practice, right? So the fact that they wouldn't have done this since, a full year ago, the last time they played in January against the Chiefs, I think that would be a monumental mistake for the Dolphins starters. They at least need 1-2 drives on both sides of the field and team to make sure they're ready to go for week 1 against Jacksonville, because you have to start off hot against the Jaguars at home and then follow it up with a big win at home in week 2 against the Buffalo Bills as well. All right, coming up in just a second, folks, padded practice notes, because there's not been often where the Dolphins have had full pads on for practice and they've gone at it each other. We're going to have the latest notes and takeaways from today's practice. But before we get into that, I need to make sure you are representing the Dolphins every single Sunday and really every single day by getting some Dolphins jerseys. You can get them at chatsports.com/Dolphins jersey. You can get Waddle. You can get Tyreek Hill. You can get Jalen Ramsey, Tua Tagovailoa. It does not matter. Make sure you get your jerseys, any color, any size, any type of way. You get the throwbacks. I like the throwbacks like this one right here from Tua that they're going to be wearing on week 2 against the Buffalo Bills. Make sure you get your Dolphins jersey today. Like you said, can get any one you want. Chatsports.com/Dolphins jersey is the link. Put that in the description and comments for all of y'all at home. So go get your jerseys today. I wouldn't want to miss out as the season is getting very, very close to underway. All right, the first note that I want to talk about with Dolphins practice today it's a good one, folks. Jaylen Wright, he's continuing to impress, and he had such a good first preseason game against the Falcons. Turned a lot of heads. Didn't turn my head because I was expecting Jaylen Wright to flash that ability and dynamic playmaking and speed. He's continuing to do it, man. And the part that is actually a little bit surprising to me is the physicality that he's playing with. I thought he was more of a speed back, but I should have known after he got that good scouting profile of being a good pass protector and blocker that he would not be afraid of hitting the hole and hitting that linebacker and defensive lineman and getting through the contact. Jaylen Wright has been extremely good for this Dolphins team, and I expect him to be that third running back for this depth chart without a doubt behind Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane, creating the best running back trio in the NFL. I also want to mention this. Elijah Campbell might be cooked, and it's not because he's injured, but the rotation safety who probably had the edge on that fourth safety spot on the depth chart, I think there's a legit chance he ends up losing that spot because it's a competitive room when you think of what the Dolphins have with Javon Holland, Jordan Poyer obviously being the starters. You got Marcus Bay, who was signed, who's anticipated to be the third safety. Who knows if that's ultimately going to be the case? You have Elijah Campbell in there. You have the 6th-round rookie Patrick McMorris. And you also have Nick Needham working in at safety a little bit here. And with how well Patrick McMorris has played over the past week and a half, including a great performance in the first preseason game, it would not shock me one bit if Elijah Campbell ends up off this Dolphins 53-man roster. I'm not projecting it as of right now, and that's the reason why this is saying might be cooked. But with McMorris continuing to play better and Chris Grier obviously liking him, spent his pick on him. I know it was late, but spent a pick. I think there's a chance that McMorris might end up being this fourth safety behind May, Holland, and Jordan Poyer. All right, let's talk about the offensive line now because there is a little bit of a shuffle on the interior here, and this has obviously been one of the biggest talking points for the Fins ever since the draft after they didn't do anything in the interior offensive line. But Robert Jones seems to be the starting left guard for this team right now with Isaiah Wynn still on the PUP list. And I'll tell you this, Robert Jones also was the orange practice player today, which means he had an outstanding practice on Monday, and he's getting rewarded. And with Aaron Brewer out for the next couple weeks, as Barry Jackson noted, with that hand injury, Liam Eichenberg, who was initially listed as the starting right guard on the depth chart for the Fins, now has to go back to playing center, which he's been a backup center for his entire career, which slots in Jack Driscoll at right guard, who I labeled as a loser in that game against the Atlanta Falcons, which maybe that was a little bit harsh because PFF actually graded Jack Driscoll pretty high, and Driscoll was actually the second highest rated player according to Pro Football Focus in that first preseason game against Atlanta, only trailing Jaylen Wright. But I didn't like what I saw from Driscoll as he got some snaps at center in that game. But as right guard, maybe Driscoll could play a little bit of a story here. And reports have been out there from different reporters, not just one, but a few, that Jack Driscoll, after a really tough first week and a half in Dolphins training camp, has really picked things up over the past week or so. And with a good game against Atlanta, if he continues that momentum with a good week of practice this week and a good game on Saturday against the Commanders, Driscoll might be able to nab that starting right guard spot if Isaiah Wynn and Aaron Brewer are both unable to go, with Wynn likely being unable to go as he's still on the PUP list. Let me know, though, are you concerned about the O-line? I could have just showed you your starting left guard, center, and right guard for the first game against the Jaguars. Obviously, you would have Teron Armstead and Austin Jackson on the 2 outside spots. But let me know, are you concerned about the O-line with where it is right now? Type Y for yes or type N for no. I'll say this, I am not happy with where it is, and I am a little scared of this offensive line. I've talked about it so much, right? With this offensive line and right guard being a massive need for the Fins. And with that not being completely addressed still, and then you've got so many injuries happening so far, it's not the best thing in the world if you're asking me. So you could just go to a full screen here at Goldman. It's fine with a different L3. But I don't know, man. I'm terrified of this offensive line. I don't like where it's at right now, and I would still like to see someone get brought in, maybe a trade, maybe a free agent signing. Either way, having Rob Jones, Liam Eichenberg, and Jack Driscoll all being starters week 1 when we thought it would only be one of them starting week 1, it does concern me a little bit because if this offensive line holds this offense back, I'm going to be very upset at Chris Grier for not addressing that issue during the draft or in free agency. All right, that's going to do it for today's show. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel because, well, we're going to have everything you need surrounding the Miami Dolphins, whether it be news, notes, takeaways, highlights, rumors, trade stuff. We have it all, including live shows every week, Tuesday live show, watch parties for every game. It's going to be a very fun season, so make sure you're subscribed and join us for this big-time run the Dolphins are hopefully going to be able to make.